Today we're going to talk about how to make your audit nonconformities bulletproof so that nobody can argue them and so that people can actually correct the problems after you've written them up. Hey everybody. Hey, I know that the video quality on these has not been great. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'm using OBS Studio. I've got a very high resolution camera and it looks like there's a problem with OBS Studio. It's just not capturing properly. So I'm working on it. These are supposed to be HD quality and they're just not. Plus, you know, I'm working with this, so that's not helpful. But anyway, what we're going to be talking about today is how to make your nonconformities bulletproof. Now, this is going to apply to you whether you're an internal auditor or an external auditor working for a third-party certification body. Interesting point. They don't teach this in class. They do not teach you how to do this, which is a stunning omission, because this is what distinguishes the very good, high-quality, excellent auditors from everybody else. You know, the bottom of the barrel guys who are running around there doing stuff. The methods I'm going to show you are simple, but they're going to ensure two things. One, everybody understands your nonconformity, but most importantly, they can fix it now, because if they don't understand it, they don't know how to fix it. And what's the point of writing a nonconformity if it's not to present something that needs to be fixed? And a lot of auditors are just running around there writing up nonconformities, and they don't really care what happens afterwards. So we're going to fix that. So buckle up and let's get right into it. All right. Each nonconformity you write, now whether it's internal audit or external audit, right, must contain three elements. If you put all three of these elements, it's going to make your nonconformities bulletproof. What are they? The first one is the requirement. Okay, I want you to copy and paste the exact text of the clause from the standard or the paragraph of the procedure that you're saying is being violated. Don't paraphrase it. You're going to paraphrase it wrong. If you paraphrase it wrong, your entire nonconformity is corrupt from the beginning and no one can do anything about it. Copy and paste it, because you may think you know what that clause means, but when you copy and paste it, it's going to be a great gut check. But better than that, it's telling the person who receives this nonconformity later the exact clause and the exact wording from that standard or the procedure. So there's no argument about interpretation. The next thing is the evidence. You're going to put down all the evidence that supports why you're writing a nonconformity in the first place, all right? And this is objective evidence only. You're only allowed to present objective evidence, and this is a very, very difficult thing for auditors to do, all right? It requires them to sort of deny part of their humanity, and you know, all day long we're being subjective, but when you're an auditor, you're not allowed to be subjective anymore, all right? This is another huge reason why why I'm able to get so many clients out of their nonconformities, because the third-party auditors put in their subjective evidence as opposed to objective evidence. So what is objective evidence? This definition comes from ISO 8402 in 1994. Now, ISO has subsequently released an updated definition, which is much, much worse and makes auditing much more complicated and worse, frankly. All right? If they went back to this definition, auditing around the world would be better overnight. So I'm pressing the authors of ISO 19011 to take back and use this definition again. And so far, of course, they're being arrogant and they're kind of being smug about it, saying they don't have to, but the new definition is terrible. Here's the thing, we don't care. There's no rule that says which definition we have to use. We're going to use this one because the goal is to make your nonconformances really, really good so that someone can fix a problem later. So let's look at the definition. Information which could be proven true based on facts obtained through observation, measurement, test, or other means. I'm going to make it simple. We only care about that first part. Information which can be proven true. So objective evidence must have a component to it that enables it to be verified by someone not present at the audit. This is crucial, and this will distinguish you from every other auditor out there. This will make you the excellent auditor and everybody else the bum, okay? Because the problem is auditors, especially third-party auditors, they have main character syndrome. They think they walk in and they think they're the king of the universe, right? In reality, what is happening? What's happening in reality, in the physical world? The auditor is standing there, okay? He or she is standing there, and they're surrounded by a couple people. The only people who are witnessing what is happening at that moment are those people that happen to be standing around them. In the auditor's mind, they think the whole world revolves around them. So they write up a vague finding, and they think that everyone is going to understand it. And what happens in the real world? Later, somebody who wasn't present at the audit is going to get assigned the corrective action to fix that, and they're not going to have a clue as to what that auditor was talking about. All right? This is the practice you must stop. You can't do that. If you follow this definition, all right, your NCs will be bulletproof and will allow someone not present at the audit to understand completely what you were looking at. Now, I'll do another video probably on what this means, how to do objective evidence, but it means capturing everything, including, and this is taboo and I don't care, including the names or titles of the people you spoke with, right? Third-party auditors are taught never to do that, and it's wrong. It's actually a violation of 19,011. You have to do it. Verbal testimony is a form of evidence, and you have to record your evidence. Ergo, you have to record your verbal testimony that you receive. Plus, that enables it later, someone later, to go back and talk to the person you talked to verify and find out what was the auditor talk about, what was they saying, etc. So please do that. Make sure you do capture all the objective evidence, forms, documents, places you're standing, etc., but also whoever you were talking to at the time. The third element is the rationale. This is connecting everything. It says, why is there a disconnect between, or let's say, why does the evidence show the requirement was not met? What is the disconnect there? Okay, and that can be sort of a text prose kind of thing. You're explaining why does the evidence show that the requirement was not met. So here's an example. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can see it on the screen, right? This is a way to write up a nonconformity. This would be a good practice for internal audits. Usually the external auditors have a form they're filling out. And notice that all three elements are there. So now I want you to imagine that you went on vacation. All right? Cancun, wherever you went. I don't know. You came back and you're all suntanned and oiled up and everyone's jealous. And so somebody gets mad and says, oh, good, we're going to give that guy the corrective action. And they give you a corrective action for an audit that happened while you were in Mexico. You weren't there. If this is what is presented to you, you have everything you need. You have the exact clause of ISO 9001. In this case, it's 8.3.4. It's right there for you. You don't even need to go get it. You can read it. Then it shows the evidence. In this case, it says the design record folder for the Titan project in July on SharePoint, and they interviewed the engineering manager. Okay, so you can go to the engineering manager. You can pull up the folder. You can go into SharePoint. You've got everything there. You can replicate the auditor's experience. And then the final disconnect was that the practice didn't meet the requirements. All three elements are there. You know how to do containment. You can fix the exact examples that the auditor found, and then you can take holistic corrective action. Here's another example. This is the way I like to do it. All right, where I break it up into 3 paragraphs. I cite the requirement, then I put a space, and then I put the evidence, and then a space, and then the rationale. So again, all 3 elements are there. Whoever receives this doesn't have to have been there next to me during the audit. And they can actually fix this now because all 3 elements are there. All right, let's look at this in the real world. This is an actual nonconformity that I wrote up for an Oxebridge client, okay? The number on the far left is just the corrective action number they eventually signed. I've got the clause number, 715 in that case. And then I'm copying and pasting the requirement out of 715.2, being very, very specific as to which one. Okay, I then have the evidence. Notice that it says interviews with management of Houston and Malaysia, reviewed the calibration log. So they can go back to the management. I didn't put names in. I don't need to. They know who they are. But in this case, they go back to the management. They can confirm that, and they can go check the calibration log. In this case, the rationale is that no calibration frequency was set for step blocks, but some were calibrated 10 years ago. It's not clear if this is acceptable or not. Therefore, the interval for calibration of the step blocks has not been specified as required by ISO 9001. The C on the end means it's corrective action. That's something else entirely I won't get into, but it's requiring corrective action, in other words. But somebody doesn't need to have been there standing next to me, and they'll have all 3 of those elements, and now they can fix that. They're going to go into the calibration log, and they're going to realize, okay, we should formally set a frequency for calibration of the step blocks, and then define that somewhere, okay? Let's look now at, this is a nonconformity that was written up by Intertech, and I understand, I know that the screen is small, you probably can't read it, all right? What it's saying here is that they said the statement of nonconformity was that the activity of flowing down the organization requirements is not fully effective, okay? Their evidence then was, it says, as an example, the organization's flow downs did not include record retention requirements, notification of nonconforming material has been sent once discovered, and AS 9100 clause 843M. So this is weird. The auditor here is making a classic and annoying mistake. Annoying, all right? They quoted the clause only by the title, then they misquoted the actual requirement. So they cited the clause number, but they didn't copy and paste. And worse, it's based on a wrong interpretation. So they don't quote the exact requirement, then they paraphrase the requirement, but they get it wrong. Now, in this case, what they're saying is that basically on your purchase orders, you have to flow down all those requirements in the bullet points of 843. Now, everyone has ruled that that's not true. ISO has ruled that's not the case. The IAQG for the AS standard, this is an AS audit finding, they ruled this is not required. So everybody ruled this is not requirement, but the auditors write it up anyway. They just keep doing it because they don't read the official rulings and the resolutions, etc. So in this case, he just invented a requirement, and then it ends with a subjective opinion that something is not fully effective. This is something they do teach in the lead auditor classes, and it's wrong. They tell people to write up their findings saying the process is not effective or not fully effective. That's completely your opinion. Completely your opinion, okay? If one bit of evidence says I have a nonconformity, that doesn't mean my entire process is ineffective. It is your opinion, and you're not allowed to put opinions in there. You just stop and you just say, I found a problem. I don't need to go into detail about a process is ineffective. That's editorializing, which doesn't belong in there. So this nonconformity was thrown out because we were able to produce the IAQG rulings and everything and said this requirement doesn't exist. Here's one from DECRA. All right, let's see here. In this case, they said clause 8.3.5, design and development outputs. All right, so they only quoted the clause, but they didn't copy and paste the actual words out of it. They then say the statement of nonconformity is the process of defining on the engineering outputs the methods or required data for identification and maintenance of tooling is not completely effective. First of all, the wording is horrible. Nobody understands what that means, okay? The person's language skills are just not good, right? But then there evidence was tooling drawings, and the part I blacked out was the actual tooling drawings, because I don't want you to see that. The tooling drawings do not include requirements for tool identification and tool maintenance. So in this case, the DECRA auditor didn't quote the exact requirement and just put a clause number, then made up a requirement, invents a requirement that doesn't exist, saying that 8.3, which is called design and development of product, now relates to tooling, which you don't even sell. Therefore, it's not a product. They just made that up. And they said that your drawings must contain requirements for tool identification and tool maintenance. That's nowhere near in the standard. It's just not in the standard. It doesn't exist, right? So it misinterprets the evidence, and then, of course, it includes a subjective opinion saying it is not completely effective, which, again, is an opinion. You don't do that. All right, now let's look at one more, and this is an actual nonconformity with NQA, and in this case, they wrote up. They only quote, again, they cite the clause number, but they don't copy and paste the text. So this one's 843, information for external providers, and it says here that the statement of nonconformity is that the evidence that the importance of ethical behavior has been communicated to suppliers and subcontractors was not available at the time of the audit. And then their objective evidence was ethical behavior training records were not available for employees provided by the subcontractor under a subcontract agreement. In this case, again, they don't quote the exact requirement, and then they make up a requirement that doesn't exist, that there needs to be records of ethics. Now, if you're an ISO 9001 user, you're not going to know what we're talking about. AS 9100 just does require that there be two things: internal ethics, that employees are aware of ethical behavior, and that you make your subcontractors aware of ethics that need to be ethical. However, there's no requirement that there be a record, and the IAQG has ruled that a purchase order is not required when you engage with a supplier. You can do it verbally. So there's certainly no requirement for recording a purchase. Never mind, in this case, what they're saying is flow this down to suppliers either versus a subcontract agreement or a purchase order again. So it was just a made-up requirement, and then it demanded evidence that's not required, specifically that there should be these training records in a subcontract agreement, etc. So the entire nonconformity was just baffling, and then eventually it was tossed out as a result of that. So without these 3 points, again, you've got to have your requirement, the evidence, and the disconnect, the rationale. Without those 3 points, your nonconformities can be challenged, they can be thrown out, they can be misunderstood or not understood at all. But worst of all, no one can take containment. Think about it. Why are you writing up a nonconformity? You're writing up a nonconformity so someone can fix the problem. They're not going to be able to fix it if it doesn't make any sense. So they have to be able to take containment, and then, of course, they can't correct it in the long term. So there's no point in you really, providing any kind of nonconformity if you're not going to follow that. So remember, those 3 crucial points are going to make your nonconformities bulletproof, and you'll be a better auditor than anybody else out there.